Hello. Happy Friday. Welcome to my first Facebook Live. This is very low budget. This is literally me, my smartphone, a ring light, and a dream. This is it. Hopefully, if you like what you see today, I can continue doing maybe monthly lunch and learn type Facebook Lives. It really depends on the feedback that I get. I might just hop on here. The reason why I'm here today, though, is because I had a prior engagement that I was supposed to attend. But unfortunately, something came up last minute. It's an appointment that I have to do later on this afternoon, which would have cut me short from doing the other engagement. So I was like, okay, let me just cancel that. And then since I have all this free time, since I canceled all of my clients for today, let me just go ahead and do something else. So that's why I'm doing this Facebook Live. So hopefully, like I said, you enjoy what you see. And then if so, then I may continue and just do a little lunch and learn. So it's 12 o'clock, a little bit after 12 Central Standard Time. So we're looking at 12:03 on February the 20th. So I just want to hop on here for, about an hour and talk about loving myself first, or loving yourself first in this case. So if you see me on Facebook, like my posts, it's always like hashtag love yourself first, because this is the month of love. It's Heart Month as well. And so I am a huge proponent of people loving themselves first and being our own self advocate. So if you don't know me personally, my name is Marisa Beach, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm licensed here in the state of Tennessee. And I have my own solo private practice. And when I mean solo dolo. I do all the things. I do my marketing. I do my content creation. I do my billing. I do it all. And I am a one-woman show. I have worked with clients with trauma and done trauma-informed work for almost 10 years. It'll be 10 years around June or July of this year. So I'm very, very proud of the time that I've been in mental health, because mental health is a difficult industry. And a lot of people don't make it through as far as professionally, because it can cause burnout. You can get a lot of exposure to other people's trauma. You get vicarious trauma. It's a lot. So the fact that I've managed to last for almost a decade in this industry is, to me, is something to be very proud of. But I have primarily worked with people who have experienced some type of trauma, either early childhood, late adolescence, early adulthood. Ages 0 to 18 is my target area of trauma. But I mean, trauma is trauma at any time of your life. But primarily, I do work with people who have had some history of childhood or early adolescent or late adolescent trauma. And so that's what I do. I provide trauma-informed care, education, and recovery. And so my primary goal for people who are recovering from trauma is to help them to have self-compassion, self-love, love themselves first, self-advocacy. I'm very much about the self, accountability, all those things. I'm very much about the self with my clients. And so love myself first, or love yourself first, is kind of a theme that I have. And that's an everyday theme. It's not just for the month of February. It's every day that I encourage my clients to love themselves first. So we're going to talk about that today, and why that is so beneficial and so helpful and so, needed post-trauma. So I got my stuff in front of me, so you might see me look down a little bit, because I got all my paperwork, and I got stuff on my laptop too. So let's go ahead and get started and talk about, excuse me. I'm sorry, y'all. Got a frog, gotta frog it. So let's talk about why is loving ourselves so hard. A lot of people struggle with that. Self-love is a struggle for a lot of people. So the one answer to why loving ourselves is so hard at times is trauma. I tell all my clients, all roads lead back to trauma. And so we can't really do anything diagnostically. We can't really talk about problems unless we have some acknowledgement of trauma. And so what I do for my clients, in our intake paperwork, our initial paperwork, I always have them complete an ACE. So that's the Adverse Childhood Experiences Assessment. And it's a list of 10 questions that covers 10 different areas of adverse childhood experiences that's commonly seen when it regards to early trauma. Now, there are other types of trauma exposures, but those outline the most common ones. And so the higher your ACE score out of 10, the more likely you're going to experience other problems like chronic pain, depression, anxiety, suicidality, all these different things can come as a result, substance abuse, all these things come as a result of higher ACE scores. So I help my clients understand that, outright, like, hey, you got a pretty high ACE score. How do you think your trauma is affecting you in the present? And so that's kind of how we start that conversation. And so when we deal with early trauma, 0 to 18 specifically, because that's what the ACE covers, we're going to see a lot of ripple effects in our adult lives, especially in our relationships, and that could be intimate relationships, friendships, at our job, whatever the case may be. We're going to see some ripple effects of that. And so what I try to do with my clients is to help connect the present to the past. So I don't ask my clients to give me the spiel and talk about everything that they've been through, because that really doesn't matter to me. Because I can pretty much tell what type of childhood trauma they've experienced based on what they're experiencing in their present, how they're presenting, how their relationships look, how they perform on their jobs, what type of habits they have. So it doesn't really matter to me. I mean, it matters, of course, what they've been through, but it doesn't affect treatment if I don't know their story. And I can honestly say, out of all the clients that I have, I probably know maybe a very small handful of the entire trauma narrative, the entire trauma experience for my clients. I know one specifically, I know the entire trauma, but other than that, it's just like bits and pieces, and we just kind of unpack as we go, if they so choose to. So let's talk about some inner child wounds that come from trauma exposure. So we're looking at 4 types of trauma exposure specifically. So we're looking at abandonment, neglect, shame, and betrayal. So those are 4 just kind of basic quadrants related to trauma. Of course, we do have abuse and all those things, but specifically, I'm just looking at these 4. And so these are some of the residual effects in adulthood that comes from trauma exposure when it comes to like abandonment. So if we have experienced abandonment as children, then here are some of the ways that we present as adults. We can have a fear of rejection. We can have emotional withdrawal, difficulty trusting others, feeling unloved or unwanted, and seeking constant reassurance. So these behaviors, subconsciously, consciously, however you want to look at it, they can cause a big effect on our relationships. And I'm actually going to talk about that a little bit later. But the idea, if we do have some history of abandonment, the idea, the goal, if you will, the end game, is that we don't want people to leave us. And so if we don't want people to leave us because we know what abandonment feels like, then we will do those things to keep people with us, right? And so these become very self-sacrificing behaviors. So we're going to struggle with saying no. We're going to struggle with doing those things that really advocate for ourselves, because in our minds, anything I say or do that goes against what we're doing in this relationship or what's happening, that makes my partner happy, or makes the situation good, if I do anything against that, then that situation is going to come to an end. So that's where we see that lack of self-care. And so, especially if we have a history of abandonment. So let's move on to neglect. If we have a history of neglect in our childhood lives, that can come with, as an adult, low self-worth, a lack of self-care, self-neglect tendencies, difficulty setting boundaries, and feeling invisible or forgotten. So again, we're seeing this ripple effect of our early childhood or birth to 18 trauma narratives, trauma experiences presenting in the present. And so when we look at self-neglect tendencies specifically, I can recall dealing with people who, you know, when we have to like buy new things, like let's say our car was about to break down, or we needed new clothes, we needed new shoes, or we need to go to the dentist, or whatever the case may be, when we had those things that came up for us that were needed, that helped us to take care of ourselves, because we have a history of neglect from our caregivers, we're going to then therefore struggle with taking care of ourselves, because the mindset is, if the people that were supposed to take care of me didn't, then why should I take care of myself? So that's kind of the mindset that evolves from that. And so we kind of learn not to take care of ourselves. We learn that, you know, we don't need the new car, or we don't need to go to the dentist, or we don't need a checkup. And we just kind of go along to get along, you know, subsequently just continuing to neglect ourselves as adults, even after we've already experienced our own neglect as children. So it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. We just kind of start living out what we know to be true. Because ideally, if we go against the grain, then how do we do that? Like, how do I take care of myself if I've never had anyone take care of me or show me how to take care of myself? So those are some of the things that you have to consider when you're dealing with the residual effects of childhood trauma. So let's talk about shame. So shame, that can come with all different layers as far as, you know, trauma goes. That can be like bullying, fat shaming, shaming because of a disability, like anything can come from that. And that can also come from family, that can come from the school system, that can come from society as a whole. So there's a lot of different ways that we can be shamed. And so if we experience shame from the ages of 0 to 18, then we may experience some self-criticism, fear of judgment, hiding our true feelings, avoiding vulnerability, and perfectionism tendencies. That's how it presents as adults for us. And so that vulnerability one, man, let me tell you, vulnerability is like the F word to people who've experienced some type of shame in their history. It's hard for people to let their guard down and expose themselves emotionally when they have been shamed for doing so. So if you have been bullied because you were weaker, or you were smaller, or you weren't as smart as everybody else, then weaknesses are deemed as bad things. And so being vulnerable is deemed as a weakness. Actually, vulnerability is a strength, because if I can understand my own limitations, if I can look at myself and be like, you know what, girl, no, you can't do that. Or, you know, you really should be doing that. And just being honest about those things, and being vulnerable to the fact that, you know, I can't do it all, and I shouldn't be doing it all. And I need to take care of myself in some areas. That is actually a strength. When I can tell someone that, you know, I don't really want to do that, or I don't want to experience that, or that doesn't feel good to me, then and letting people in on that increases our authenticity, which actually is the kryptonite to childhood trauma, right? Because when you think about what childhood trauma does, it reframes, it reanimates, it re-narrates your life. So whatever you were, whoever you thought you were before trauma, becomes a whole different being after trauma. And so that's kind of what happens when we experience shame, right? So we kind of put on a facade like we're perfect now. We don't have any problems. We don't have to deal with anything, because I'm actively trying to avoid being shamed. So that decreases that authenticity, which decreases our self-care and causes a whole lot of problems in the end. And so the last childhood wound I want to look at comes from betrayal trauma. Man, this one is a big one, because betrayal is one of those subtle traumas that you don't really think of as being traumatic. But a parent lying to you about your identity, or lying to you about family history, or lying to you about anything, honestly, can derail your whole belief system, right? And so as children, we learn by exposure to things and experiences. And, it's very experiential when we're younger. We look at things, we touch things, we hear things. We're very sensory oriented when we're little. And so if we're in, situations where, we have been taught maybe, this is bad, don't do this, don't touch this, don't say that. And then something happens and we actually experience an adult doing those things, right? Or saying that stuff. Then we start to like figure out, okay, what's really going on? Because I can't do it. I can't say it, but you can. And so it develops this disconnect, right? And so a lot of the times, because I'm a parent too, we create some lies, i.e., Santa Claus, Easter Bunny, those kind of things, right? They don't exist. We know they don't exist, but they have a purpose, right? It keeps the childhood innocence alive. I can recall when I found out that Santa Claus wasn't real, I was pissed. I was highly upset when I overheard through the grapevine in my house that Santa Claus did not exist. I was hot. I was very upset. Like, what do you mean Santa Claus don't exist? What do you mean there's nobody like giving me gifts for free on the 24th and I'm waking up to them on the 25th? Like, what do you mean? Like, it destroyed me. Like, it crumbled my world. And so I think that may have been the turning point for me now that I'm thinking about it. From that point on, I was like, no, I don't do lies. Like, I'm not lying to people. Like, I'm not doing that. And so my kids, except for my 6-year-old, I think she kind of thinks Santa is real. And I'm like, I'm Santa, but I don't know. I don't think she's ready. But anyway, but even a lie like that can be deemed as betrayal. And so when we have an understanding that lies exist and that people can lie and that people can distort the truth from us, and we learn this as young people, we're going to be very wary of trusting folks. So you're going to have to show and prove to people who have had some type of betrayal trauma in their history. You're going to have to like really show me that, this is the truth, because your words mean nothing to me, right? And so when we think about ourselves and what betrayal trauma can do as far as our own self-care and loving ourselves, we actually start maybe to doubt our own reality and doubt our own truth. And that's why self-validation is so important for us post-trauma. I didn't realize that it was so bright. I'm seeing this light coming in, so I'm going to dim that blind a little bit. Okay, that's better. Okay, I love my sunlight. I'm sorry. All right, so that gives you kind of a rundown about why is loving ourselves so hard post-trauma. Because if we have these childhood wounds that have come from abandonment, neglect, shame, or betrayal, then we're going to struggle with not only connecting with others, but also connecting with ourselves, trusting our own decisions, taking care of ourselves, meeting our own basic needs, loving ourselves enough to walk away from certain situations or certain people that are harmful to us. And also we might experience times when we kind of shame ourselves, like you're too fat, or you're too stupid, or you're too ugly to do anything. So we have to be mindful that self-neglect, that self-abandonment, that self-shame, and that self-betrayal does exist, and it can happen post-trauma. So next thing we're going to look at is how can I start loving myself if I struggle with that, and talking about self-care and recovery. So when we think about self-care, a lot of people look at self-care as, things that we do on the outside, like the external stuff, getting a massage, getting your hair done, getting your nails done, going to the gym, working out, losing weight. Like, all of those things are great forms of self-care. But what I try to do with my clients is to help them dig a little bit deeper and go a little bit into more like emotional stuff or abstract stuff, or stuff that's not like concrete, like something that you can just touch or grab. So here's some ways that we may struggle with self-care. If we overspend, overeat, or overindulge, that is a form of That's the opposite of self-care. When we expect others to read our minds and meet our needs, mind readers. When we withhold success from ourselves, you got that promotion coming up, when I used to work for people, because I don't do that no more. When I used to work for people and they have like those internal promotions open, they're like, okay, such and such, you can try to apply for this promotion. Okay, if I don't love myself or I don't care for myself, then I'm not going to think that I'm going to be successful. So I'm going to like stand down. I'm not going to even apply for this promotion internally or externally. I'm just going to stay where I'm at. Ignore our deepest desires, but seek to fulfill the desires of others. Again, that goes to like the self-neglect, right? So if I have a desire for something, if I feel like I need something or want something deeply, then I'm going to bypass all of that. And then I'm going to focus on other people. Like if you're a parent, you're going to focus on your children's dreams and getting them accomplished, and you're not going to focus on yourself. Ignore your real emotions and put on a happy face. I have a lot of clients who do that. Like they are so incongruent. They can tell you the worst stories, the most saddest things that's happened to them, and just be smiling the whole time. And I'll be like, why are we doing that? What's going on here? Let's check in. Let's check in, because we don't have to do that here. Like you just told me the most horrible story ever. We should not be smiling. Don't do that. Like feel it and just, don't do that. Push ourselves beyond reasonable limits. Overworkers, man. We got to volunteer here. We got to do this. We got to do that. We don't sit down. We don't rest. Because we might feel shame from that. We might feel ashamed when we can rest. I have been called lazy back in the day. I've been called trifling back in the day. I've been called a procrastinator back in the day. So that's still something I'm working through, because I do find myself struggling to sit down on my couch, because I'm like, okay, why am I sitting down when there's all these other things that really don't exist that I feel like I need to do? Excuse me. Allow others to emotionally, physically, or sexually abuse us. Deflect compliments. Oh man, you look beautiful today. Oh well, it's just a new makeup that I use. I don't really, I don't know. I don't think I look that great. Like, just accept the compliment and say thank you. A lot of people can't do that. Say yes because you can't say no. This is a big one, because no is an answer too. And I have to tell my clients this, like, yes is an answer, but no is an answer too. So you can say no. It's okay. Avoiding time alone. If you're one of those people that can't just be by themselves and just kind of sit and just chill out by yourself, that's a lack of self-care. Because you're actually saying to yourself that, I'm not comfortable with you. So, excuse me, overexhaust yourself because your need to feel important, needy, or worthy. This can happen a lot. Again, we're overworking. We're trying to find all these things to put on our plate. Instead of clearing our plates off and just kind of being okay with the empty plate, we got to keep filling ourselves up, because we have to, feel important, because we can't do that for ourselves. Fear and emotional intimacy. Again, that comes from, that feeling of, betrayal, like, and avoiding that vulnerability because of shame. Trying to do it all ourselves and never asking for help. And trying to appear perfect. Even though we all know that perfection doesn't really exist, I think that if there's an expectation of us to be better or to be like somebody else, or comparing ourselves to other people, then 9 times out of 10, we're going to create an idealistic view of who we should be. And so because we have this idealistic view and we're trying to appear perfect, then we're going to do those things that are, inorganic to us. And again, this is pushing us away from being vulnerable, right? We're trying to connect back to ourselves post-trauma. We're trying to get to know ourselves post-trauma. But if we're doing things that are moving us away from being vulnerable and being authentic, then we're actually just exasperating the trauma and the trauma responses that come from that. So here's some opposite things to do that helps with loving ourselves more. Taking time for yourself, right? being intentional about that time too. I've told many a client, like, set 5 minutes on your clock and just do something for 5 minutes, or do nothing for 5 minutes. Just sit there and be in silence for 5 minutes. A lot of times, we rush to take care of other people. And of course that comes from that self-neglect, right? And we don't take time for ourselves. And if that is as simple as just sleeping, or just laying down, or just, eating a snack, or for therapists out there, going to the bathroom, do that. You deserve it. Allow yourself to make mistakes and to be open about your weaknesses. Again, that's that F word, vulnerability. Like, if I have to tell people that I have limitations or that I'm weak in areas, that's harmful and hurtful, right? And so when we learn to make mistakes and be okay with those mistakes, and learn from those mistakes, right? So there's a certain thing called, you can either have a victim mindset or you can have a growth mindset. And so what I try to teach my clients is to have a growth mindset, right? How can we grow from this experience? How can we learn from what's happened to us instead of being woe is me? I do not like woe is me. I just don't. Like, if we start with woe is me, that's one thing, but we can't continue in the woe is me, because we have the ability to change a lot of things in our lives, even if we don't believe we do. So it's good to vent and let it out. But at some point we have to figure out, okay, what did I learn from this? How did this challenge me? What do I do next time that's going to be different than I did this time? I ask from your needs to be met from a place of vulnerability. Again, that's that V word / F word. People just can't be vulnerable, right? Because again, if I'm showing you my weaknesses and I'm showing you my limitations, especially if we have a history of abandonment, that's going to make me feel like, okay, you're going to leave me because I'm not good enough for you. Spending time with friends, and I'll put an asterisk by this, spend time with friends that are beneficial. We don't want the emotional vampire friends. We don't want people sucking the life out of us. So spend time with friends that are beneficial, that are helpful, that are supportive. Rest, play, right? Because we do have inner children, and inner teenagers, and we, coloring, playing outside, all those things those are healthy things that we need to nourish as we get older. Sitting at a desk all day is not fun. Sometimes you got to get out and walk and play and get some fresh air. So do that for yourself. That is a form of self-care. Exercise, of course, walking around the block, you don't have to go get a full gym membership. You just go outside and get some fresh air. Eating well, right? That goes back to the neglect piece of it. If we're neglecting ourselves, we're not going to eat healthy. We're not going to take the time to do those things. We're going to just, gorge and eat all the bad stuff because we don't feel good on the inside. Spend money wisely. If you have a economic goal, right? If you want to just save up for a house or save up for a car, and you're just, spending money, out the wazoo, then that's not a form of self-care, right? Because you need money to survive. So if we're going against that, if we're just kind of spending money on those, energy vampire friends that we have, buying up all the drinks and the food for everybody else, that's another form of neglect, right? Self-neglect. So we want to be mindful of that. Pursuing our dreams. Post-trauma, like, we got to regain our dreams, because pre-trauma, we had a whole lot of them. We had a lot of dreams. We had a lot of aspirations. We had a lot of things that we wanted to do. And trauma kind of paused that. But one of the things that I admire about my clients and everybody that I've met over the almost decade that I've been doing this is that some of the most traumatized people are some of the most ambitious people. They get several degrees. They're in management. They're doing all these great things. And it just boggles my mind. I'm like, how did you do that? Like, how did you, after everything you've been through, how do you do that? And so, I don't even think they understand how they do it. But there is such a thing as resilience, and that is basically how we bounce back from things. And some people can bounce back from things a little bit differently than others. I wouldn't say better, but I would definitely say differently. So whatever dreams you got, go for it. Like, just do it. Be like Nike, just do it. Like, why not? If we eliminate the fear of failure and replace it with, the ability to succeed and understand that I have about as much a possibility of failing at this thing as I do as succeeding at this thing. I have a 50-50 chance at both. Then we can even the odds and we can really pursue our dreams post-trauma. Share honestly with others. Again, vulnerability got to be in there. Enjoy and make time to enjoy and be intimate with those you love. And that's all different types of intimacy. It doesn't necessarily have to be physical. There's spiritual intimacy, emotional intimacy. You can do like a project with someone, like DIYing with your spouse or your mate or whatever. That's very intimate, because we're sharing a task. We're together. We're doing something in a united way. Forgive. Ooh, that's a big one. That is a big one. Self-forgiveness, I would say, is the worst. Like, the hardest barrier post-trauma is self-forgiveness. But I really try to advocate that for my clients. And you would think, after dealing with trauma and having other people hurt you, that you would be able to forgive yourself pretty easily. But that is so not the case. Not the case at all. It's very difficult to forgive ourselves. Excuse me, especially if we have been made the villain in our trauma story. Especially if we have been made to believe that we are the ones that caused the trauma. And then if we are forced to forgive the person or persons that traumatized us, like if we're pushed into that and people are saying, well, you need to forgive and forget and move on, then that pauses a lot of that processing. But as a reminder, forgiveness is for you, not for the person. You don't even have to tell people that you have forgiven them. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to make it known. This is an internal work that you have to do. And we're not condoning what has happened. We're not saying that what has happened was right or fair. We're not qualifying it or quantifying it. We're just understanding that this was my reality. This is what happened to me. And we are accepting the reality as it is. And we're using this opportunity to move forward. If at some point you can kind of come back and look at your trauma and look at what's happened to you and say, okay, what did I learn from it? Like, that's a huge step, and you don't have to necessarily do that. But it does help to transition your mindset from just being a victim of what has happened to you to actually using the power of that hurt, redirecting it into something powerful for you to succeed and to grow. Appropriately express emotions, including anger and sadness. We don't want to bleed on people that didn't cut us. Okay, we don't want to keep going off on people that had nothing to do with our trauma. That is not a form of self-care. Allowing others to be disappointed in me. Ooh, that's a big one. That's a big one. Because it's all about perception, right? Because everybody's perception of right and wrong, well, there is subjective right and wrong, but the perception of other people does not necessarily have to be the reality, right? So if I look up at the sky and I see purple, that doesn't mean that it's a purple sky. That's just how I'm perceiving it. That's just how I'm seeing it. So a lot of people struggle with the perception of other people, and that perception drives their behavior and drives what they do. And so if we are in a relationship or we're with people who feel some type of way about the things that we're doing, the things that we're saying, okay, we're establishing boundaries. We're trying to, do what's right for us. We are trying to implement self-care, and they got a problem with it. And they're perceiving this to be like hurt against them as opposed to you helping you. That's a them problem. That's not a you problem. So you can allow people to be disappointed in you because their disappointment is their perception. That's how they feel. It's not a fact. Facts and feelings are two different things. So if I've done all I can do in a relationship, if I've done all I can do to help someone, and then I decide, you know what, enough is enough, I want to help me now, and you got a problem with that, sucks to be you. Tell others what they mean to you. Yes, express yourself emotionally. Say, hey, I love you. You're the best. That requires vulnerability though, right? And trust. You got to trust. If there is no trust, if there's no security in a relationship, if there's no vulnerability in a relationship, it's not a secure connection. It's going to be based on anxiety or avoidance, or a combination of both. So when you feel comfortable with a person, then you're going to allow them into the inner parts of your world emotionally. But if you don't, you're not. So don't rush that process if you don't feel emotionally safe. But that is a form of self-care when you can admit to someone that they, have made an impact in your life. Be present for your children. That means no cell phones. That means no TV, no distractions. Like, be emotionally present and grounded and focus on your kids. I struggle with that because I got a 6-year-old, and man, she talks a lot. And I zone out. Especially after I've seen like maybe 5 to 7 clients. It's been a heavy day, and I've heard a lot of talking. And then you come at me talking too. It's a lot. And I'm working on that. But being present for your children is a form of self-care. Being present in anything is a form of self-care. I can say honestly, earlier today, and I'm going to start wrapping this up because I only got a few more minutes. But earlier today, I was leaving from an appointment with my son, and I was not present and I was not focused, obviously, because I was driving the car, but I hit something and I don't know what I hit. And I think it was like I think I cut the curb a little short, and I hit, and I don't know what I did. I didn't blow out a tire or anything, gratefully, but I was not present. I was not focused. So I immediately started grounding. I started looking at the trees, looking at the sky, looking at colors, starting to kind of focus myself, because I don't know where I was during that moment, but it happens. It happens. But yeah, be present for your children and everything else too. Receiving love from others. Ooh, that's hard. That is so hard, especially when we don't feel we're worthy of it, right? If I don't feel like I'm worthy of love, I'm not going to be open to receive it. But it's good to have it. Say yes and no. Again, those are 2 options. Create a powerful support system for yourself. Again, no energy vampires in your system. No, if your circle gets so small it becomes a dot, then that's okay. Because post-trauma, you're going to lose a lot of people. And that's because they're seeing you as your authentic self. And that authentic self is the self that says yes and no. And so once you put the boundaries up, that's going to be a problem for a lot of people. So just get prepared for that. Celebrate accomplishments, big and small. I try to get my clients to celebrate small wins all the time because they think it's small. But I'm looking at them like, you didn't see yourself when you first came in here, did you? I remember in pre-K, my daughter, my oldest daughter, because she's about to graduate from high school in May, her pre-K class, they would put the pictures of the kids, like in the frames. I don't know if they do that anymore, but they would take that first day of school picture and they would put it in the frames. And, so you can kind of have that before and after. I wish I could do that with my clients. I know HIPAA will not allow me to, but I tell them, I'm like, you didn't see yourself when you came in here 6 months ago or a year ago. Like, your whole demeanor was different. Your posture was different. You cried. You were self-defeating. Like, I have to recall that for people and be like, you don't know how far you've gone, do you? You don't know how far you've come from, on this journey. So I have to recall this for people all the time. And then we celebrate that. I'm like, you did that. Oh, you said no? Okay. Nice. Love it. Let's do more of that. So I try to encourage my clients all the time. One, because I want them to see that they are improving and progressing, because that's kind of what therapy is about. You want to see, want to have the proof in the pudding. And also I want them to understand that I am not the change agent for them. I am the advocate for change. But I am not the change agent. I do not, and I repeat, I do not want my clients depending on me for their change. And I tell them that. I'm like, I didn't do that. I say, you see me one hour out of your whole day once a week. That gives you all these other days, all these other hours to deal with you in your real world. I ain't doing nothing. You're doing all the work. And they are. They really are. So I try to push them out of the nest. And I tell them, I say, okay, bird, you ready to fly? And they be like, I'm not ready. I know they're like, my therapist is always trying to get rid of me. And I do that because I want them to understand that they can do this. Like they've been equipped with this their whole lives. They just didn't understand it because it was buried under all the trauma. So once we start throwing the bricks around, we start going through the debris of trauma and we start to really find that core authentic self at the bottom of it. Oh man, we're going to hype that baby up. We're going to shine that light on that baby. And we're going to make that core authentic self know that they can do this and they can move forward. All right. Last part of this, how not loving myself affects my relationships and friendships. I think we kind of went over that a little bit like throughout this whole thing. But I will say this, I will speak a little bit on trauma bonded relationships because I see this a lot. I don't know if I'm the trauma bonded relationship whisperer or not, but I guess after you do this for a while and you just kind of hear keywords and you start to, it's like certain things just kind of activate your awareness that certain things are happening. So if we don't love ourselves, then we are going to be open to being in relationships that are very non-beneficial for our growth and our change and our development. So again, when we think about those inner childhood wounds that we talked about earlier, that's the foundation of this. This is kind of how it starts, right? So if we have abandonment, neglect, shame, betrayal trauma, that's the foundation of it. And so if we don't kind of work through these traumas before we get into relationships, then they're going to be a highlight in the relationship. So again, if I have a fear of abandonment, then I'm going to keep people in my space, in my circle that are not beneficial to me or not helpful or not loving or not supportive of me. And I'm not going to speak up in a relationship. I'm not going to be authentic. I'm not going to be honest. I'm not going to be true when things are not emotionally safe. I'm just kind of going to go along to get along. So these trauma bonded relationships are rooted in trauma, right? And can I just say, like, don't tell everybody your trauma story when you first meet them. I mean, unless it's a therapist or a doctor or somebody that you trust and that has a HIPAA type of arrangement with you that they can't tell anybody. But I hear it a lot, and I know this is really something that people who have experienced trauma do. They want to tell their story, right? They want to get it off their chest. They want to be honest about what they've been through, and that's great. But just be mindful that once you start trauma dumping, right, and you're just talking about all this trauma, this happened to me, and you create this trauma dumping ground in the relationship, that's going to be the basis for how you operate in the relationship. Because if I know that your daddy left you when you were 6 years old and ran off with Susie from the grocery store, then I'm not going to be very inclined to break up with you, even if I know I want to, I need to, because it's not a great relationship, right? Because I'm going to be thinking about how you felt when your daddy left you for Susie, left your family for Susie at the grocery store. So now this becomes like the cloud over the relationship. And neither one of us are presenting ourselves in an authentic way because we're afraid of losing each other or perpetuating more trauma or triggering more trauma by what we're doing. So we have to be mindful of that. And we have to understand that, yes, trauma is a reason. It's a valid reason for why I respond the way I respond, the way I treat myself, maybe the way I respond in conflict, the way, I operate in this world. It is a valid scientific, psychological, physiological reason why I am the way I am. However, it's not an excuse for bad behavior. So we can't use that as the catalyst for us staying in relationships because you were traumatized or because your daddy hit you or because your mama did this and your grandpa did that. I'm going to stay with you even at the expense of myself. That is definitely not self-care. And that is not healthy, because what happens is this weed called resentment starts to build up because I'm not speaking my truth. I'm letting you do whatever you want to do. I'm really feeling some type of way because of my needs are not getting met in this relationship. But then again, it's that umbrella of trauma that's keeping us together. Like, I don't want to activate your trauma. I don't want to trigger you. So I'm not going to speak up. And so we start to feel real uneasy. Then we start to feel mad. Then we start to feel despised. We start to have some, and then here that resentment grows. And that resentment in a relationship is a hard weed to cut down. Because once I feel some type of way and I'm looking at you sideways, and I feel like I don't want to be around you anymore, like I'm tired of you whining and begging and complaining, that's not healthy, right? So now we have created a divide because I didn't do what I was supposed to do. I didn't speak up for myself. I didn't advocate for myself. I didn't, use my I statements and said, I feel, I think, I believe. I wasn't assertive with my communication. So now my communication is being aggressive. Now I'm becoming avoidant. Now I want to push you away. Now I want to block your phone number. Now I want to block you on social media because I don't want to deal with you, because I'm resentful, because of the way you treated me. Nope. It was the way you treated yourself. And it was the way that you allowed yourself to be treated, because you thought that the trauma, that cloud of trauma, was a valid reason for you to be mistreated in this relationship or for you to mistreat others. And so what I try to do with my couples is I try to repair this trauma bond. And there are some trauma bonded relationships that actually can last. And the reason why they last is because there's authenticity. I'm not trying to fake it. I'm not trying to, front. I'm letting you know, okay, this is who I am. I'm in therapy. I'm doing the work. I'm working on my, de-escalation, my emotional regulation. I'm working on my assertive communication skills. I'm working on this. I'm working on that. I'm still a work in progress. I understand that I might still trigger you or activate your trauma. That authenticity goes a long way. And also accountability. So if you go off on your partner or your spouse because you are having some type of trauma activation or trauma triggering going on, if you can say, okay, I apologize. I'm so sorry. I should have grounded myself before I had this conversation. I should have taken a breath. I should have taken some, drank some water, put some cold water on my face. I didn't use my tools and I apologize. So if you can do that and still understand that trauma is the elephant in the room in this relationship, and you guys work through it and work around it and work together to counteract it. And as I tell my clients, we're going to kick trauma's butt out of this relationship. If you could do that, then trauma bonded relationships can improve and they can get better. But if we can't do that, then that's when the weed of resentment will grow, and we'll start feeling some type of way about our partner and towards our spouse. And then we start to become avoidant and we want to just shut everything down. And now we're like, I don't want to deal with you anymore. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to move from being enmeshed and just totally, tight with our partner to the fact that we're smothering them because of the trauma, to cutting them off totally because of the trauma. Because that actually may make the trauma experience worse. So we want to be mindful of that. All right, so we got about 10 minutes. So what I would like to do is to teach you some, relaxation skills, to kind of show you some ways to relax yourself. And again, this is part of our self-care. When we understand what our bodies are saying to us, because all this emotional energy is stored in our bodies, right? Emotions are not concrete. They're experiential. So we experience these emotions in our bodies. We get the tension, if we're embarrassed, we feel hot, we get the red face. All these things are experiential. So if we can give ourselves time and just acknowledge what's going on in our bodies, it's a lot better than just going through life and being like, whatever. I feel nothing. I'm a robot. So we don't want to do that. We want to be very mindful and aware of what's going on in our body. So these are a few things that I use, and I teach these to my clients, really basic things. And these are really good for you if you sit at your desk a lot, if you are a work from homer, home for worker. If you work from home and you sit at your desk a lot, this is really helpful because it only works with your upper body, your torso and your head. That's it. All right. So you always want to stretch. I always want to stretch. Ooh, that feels good. Especially if you've been sitting for a long time. This kind of wakes your body up. Especially if you're just kind of sitting in one spot. This cuts down a lot on checking out, like dissociation, and that stillness that happens when we're just kind of like not here, you know, body's here, mind's gone. So this actually wakes us up. So you want to stretch, you know, as much as you can. It really, really helps a lot. If you want to just kind of, be aware of your environment, because, you know, sometimes when we're having like trauma activations, we don't know what's going on in our environment. Just kind of scan your room, just kind of turn your head slowly and just kind of assess where you are. Colors are really good. So I'm looking at a purple wall. I'm looking at my calendar. It's got numbers on it. I'm looking at my brown or tan blinds, white piece of paper. Just kind of mentally call out colors as you scan the room. Golden butterflies, that kind of thing. That helps your mind to reset on what you want to focus on in the present. Again, always present focus. When you tilt your head to the left, if you get a lot of tension in your neck, tilt your head to the left and then turn your head and look at your shoulder. And then turn it back and do the same on the opposite side. And of course you want to be breathing while you're doing that. So, and this will increase your range of motion as well. Again, we're just attuning to our bodies as a form of self-care. Just saying, hey, I feel you. I know something's going on. I'm not going to question it. I'm just going to help us relax. All right, take a deep breath in. Breathing is always great. There's all different types of breathing. You got box breathing, you got extended exhales, so on and so on. But find the type of breathing method that works for you. My hair is just acting weird. Okay. All right, so take a deep breath in. Fill up your belly. Hold it. And sometimes you want to take like a deep breath in and then do a sigh. Like you're just dropping your bags, like you just come home from vacation. You're just like, I made it off the plane. You can do that. And you can extend that exhale if you want to a little bit longer. And that also helps reduce like the panic or, you know, the anxiety. Raising your shoulders up to your ears and just dropping them down with a sigh. Because sometimes our shoulders get kind of clenched up, especially if you're like typing on your computer. You kind of keep this posture where your shoulders are kind of tight. So we want to drop them intentionally. Ooh, I'm getting sleepy. Another thing we want to remember, and this is something I have to help my clients, you know, understand. Unclench that jaw. There are some teeth grinders in here. I don't know who's watching me, but a lot of people grind their teeth. And so we want to make sure that we are unclenching our jaw, because that's a lot of stress that we're putting in the back of our mouth. So, you know, you don't have to keep your mouth wide open, like, you know, like you're at the dentist, but you do want to kind of separate your top and your bottom jaw. So like that. And then if you just kind of want to work your jaw around, you can do that too. But make sure you're unclenching your jaw. Clenched jaws means that you got something to say that you're not saying. So say it, so you don't have to clench that jaw. Again, that goes into the authenticity. Like, say what you got to say what you mean, and mean what you say. And that helps a lot. My neck is still stressed, y'all. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get it together. But yeah, so just to recap what we talked about today. We are wanting to love ourselves more and love ourselves first. So that starts with us understanding and identifying what our foundational trauma history is and understanding the impact of that trauma history on our present functioning. And so if we have anything related to abandonment, neglect, betrayal, or shame in our trauma, in our history regarding trauma, then we're going to respond as adults in that manner. And so we may incorporate or may manifest or may, create instances where we have self-neglect, self-abandonment, self-shame, and, self-betrayal. So just be mindful of that, right? Just be mindful of where you are in your trauma, walk, in your trauma history, in your trauma narrative, and take care of yourself. Put yourself first and understand that there's nothing wrong with you doing that. It's a testament to you as a survivor, where you can get to the point where you can look at yourself in the form that you're in, right? We're not broken as trauma survivors. We are reinvented, honestly. So I use this example when I talk about what trauma does. I use the example of a plate, like a really good heavy trauma plate, right? So, or a really good plate. So if you have like a china plate and you just kind of break the plate and it just scatters all over the place, like the pieces scatter. If you try to put the pieces back together, it's not going to look the same as it did before, right? It's going to be a little cracked here, a little cracked there. But that's kind of what we try to do after trauma. We try to reconnect. We try to, reincorporate things into our lives. We will never be the exact same as we were before trauma, but we can still do things. We can still live. We can still have a great life. We just have to understand who we are and be honest about who we are and what we can do post-trauma. So loving yourself first is being authentic, holding yourselves accountable, and also accepting love from real people who truly love you, and understanding that you're not broken, you're not a victim. What has happened to you is part of your story, but it's not the end of your chapter, and it's not the end of your book, and that you are still able to live a great life. So don't give up on yourself, right? And surround yourself with people who understand who you are, and where you are in your journey. So it is now 12:58. I'm going to hop off here a little early, but thank you to everyone who either watched the live or you're going to watch it later. I appreciate your time. It's such a great feeling to know that I'm doing this work and helping people every single day that come into my office and who I see on telehealth. It's such a blessing. I'm so grateful to do what I do. And if you like what you see and you want more lunch and learns like this, let me know in the comments, and I will be, I will try to arrange something else, maybe next month. So thanks again for your time. You guys are awesome. You take care, and hopefully I'll see you soon. Bye.